My name is Hamza. I'm the founder and director at Data Replies. We are a business here in the UK that specializes in data analytics, and helping businesses make sense of their data. Whenever I talk about data, I feel like there is a very big spectrum. There are people that are very convinced of what data is and they're very deep into it, and then there are people that really maybe don't realize how wide data is. And so the most common thing that I get, and I still do get it, that when I talk about data, is that data is basically zeros and ones. You think of your matrix, you think of your movies, you think of the stock exchange, you think of your Excel spreadsheets, and so you think of data as that. You think of like boring numbers on a sheet, and that's all it is. And maybe at one point it was, but with the advance in technology, the amount of resources that we have at the moment in terms of computing powers and things that we can do with data, the definition of data has expanded a lot. We talked about this, we realized what data is, but that leaves us still with a question. And the question is it sexy? Is it interesting? Is it attractive? And so, when I was preparing for this talk, the first thing I did was literally just Google what is sexy, what is attractive. And so if you go by the definition of what does sexy mean, it's the ability to receive interest and to be attractive. It's the ability of having something that attracts you and makes it interesting for you to learn more about and to sort of explore more. When you think about data and when you think about things like that use data, what comes to your head is your Excel spreadsheets. Everyone has had experience with them, in high school or, in whatever situation you had. You have your names, you have your surnames, you have your, your tables, and that's not really attractive. That's not really sexy. That's not the definition of sexy. And so when you talk about things like that, definitely that's not attractive. Even more when you talk about, you go a little bit, and maybe some of you in the audience will be a little bit familiar with data, and you talk about databases, right? In databases, what you have is ID numbers that define the user type, you define the type of data, you define the space that the data is going to take in terms of megabytes, all of this, and you put it in a table like that in the second row, and it's still not very, very sexy. I mean, I'm a little bit biased, but you probably should. And the reason why is because data is everywhere. If you drive a car, you probably have done an insurance, right? And when you do an insurance, you fill data. You fill your name, what your patterns are, where you go, where you don't go. So what the insurers do then is take that data and then add it to personal data that they might have about you. Things like where you live or where you stayed, to give you that price. So if you know that's what they do, it's really useful to you. It gives you power to sort of understand why you got that price, or maybe why you shouldn't drive beyond a certain speed limit, and all of these things. Traffic is something where data, a lot of people don't realize this, but data is really, really engraved in traffic. It was one of the first subjects where data was really key, because it's really important for them to understand how many people are going to go through a particular street at any particular time, so they can put police officers, they can put traffic lights, they can put all of these things. And then if we talk about our everyday and creative businesses, YouTube, Google, Spotify, these are big companies, right? So YouTube, I was reading an article that talked about how the fact that YouTube now is not just a streaming platform, it's a search engine. A lot of people now go to YouTube not to just look at stuff, but also to search stuff like how to fix my sink or how to do this. And all of that means that if you upload a video to YouTube, there is a lot of data that goes in the background to the people that's going to show that video, right? Google, it's a giant. We all know Google. It's a huge search engine, and we know that it's all based on data, whether you come up on top or on the last page. And then Spotify is really a good example, and we're going to talk a little bit more about Spotify soon. But a little bit more detail. But what's really interesting about Spotify is that Spotify is not the first streaming platform for music, and it's not the last. But Spotify is now the number one streaming platform for music. And the reason is that they really focused on data. They really focused on trying to get the most for their data. So we talked about the fact that it is interesting and you should probably care, because it's in everyone's life, and it's, you use it whether you want it or you don't want it. It's in your life. But do creative businesses need it? If you're a creative business, do you need this? And yeah, the answer, probably unsurprisingly, it's yes. And that's why, maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, less. But now it's a very saturated market, right? A lot of companies are popping up everywhere, right? The internet is a beautiful thing. It managed to connect all of the world, right? I'm in the UK and I'm doing this, and it's amazing, right? But that also means that you're getting a lot of talent from all over the world, which means it's even harder to make your voice heard, right? And so in this saturated market, data really plays a really strong role. Less time available, and this is mostly on the consumer side. We talked before about TikToks, how TikToks are great, but now the attention span of people is 10, 15 seconds. It's like scroll. So if you're not able to capture that 10, 15 seconds attention span, it's going to be really hard for you to give your message, to tell what's important to you. And then finally, budget. It's definitely something that now a lot of creative businesses are keeping into account. Money is not unlimited, and although there is margin for risk, no one can provide 100% of certainty that your creative is going to work and that particular piece of art is going to do really well, or that ad is going to really be taken out and it's going to be viral. No one can predict that. But definitely lowering that risk and making sure that you're putting your best work forward is what a lot of businesses are now interested in. Then the question comes, right? Data is so great, data is amazing, but is data enough? Is data enough to do what we want to do? And the answer is probably not, actually. More than 50% of marketers believe that creativity and technology are needed for success, right? And it's honestly, in my experience, I've seen the same thing. I can create the best data models. I can give you the best insights. But if there is no creativity behind it, if there is no power of personal creativity behind it, then data is really not enough. Data is a tool at the end. And so, is there a magic formula? Is there a lot of people ask me this? It's like, okay, fine, data is not enough. So what's the formula?